The mass of gore was spread across the road like a thin red film, its slick fur now wet and sticky, a family of flies carpeting the body and picking away at its form. The morning sun had arrived too late to the scene to deter the scavengers, and too soon to bake the scattered remains back into the dirt. Instead, they sat ignored, as nature's frantic struggle with itself was reduced to a brief meeting between paste and passing tires. I felt the car's wheels slide, just a little, as I drove onward. I don't remember if I had the radio on. After so many early mornings on the highway, scenes of unlucky roadkill had become as commonplace as the vast farm fields that dotted my commute. I would take that 2-hour drive to my work every morning, just before the sun would rise. I've never been comfortable driving in the sun. I can deal with glare, but the inside of a hot car is unbearable. Doesn't matter if I turn on the AC or roll down the windows, nothing helps. The heat refuses to leave. It's the kind of heat that bakes into the plastic of the dashboard till it stings to even sit near. It's the kind of heat that makes your skin peel, the kind that runs sweat down into your eyes and makes your brain melt just a little. I think that boiling feeling gets to the animals too. I think their fur bakes, their throats dry, and their brains melt too. Melt until a rabbit is so wired up it's fine taking its chances running across 6 lanes of traffic. Again, my wheels slide over the slick below. I have learned to cope. I leave before the sun rises, and I sweat on the drive back home. Occasionally it will rain, and that rain will bring with it a breeze and a rhythm. But so often there is no rain. Instead, only heat. Traffic had been heavy that evening, and I found myself trapped within a sea of irate commuters. Each of us encased in our own tin cans, each one struggling to pump out cool air through plastic lungs. I tried to listen to the radio, but it did little to distract me from the pinging metal of my car's bones. As soon as I crawled in reach of the first off-ramp, I fled from that stovetop and out into the open air. I hadn't taken this route before, but dirt side roads were a welcome change. I didn't get to enjoy that freedom for long as soon I found myself navigating another scene of stinking roadkill. The road ahead sizzled and popped in the late day sun, a carpet of scattered gore masking even the treads of whatever had caused it. It was hard to tell what had been hit. Their pulped red carcasses had likely spent the day being cooked in the blazing sun. I slowed to a crawl and passed the first mound, watching as the flies that gathered busily explored. I tried to breathe through my mouth, but the smell dried my throat and I gagged. Easing onto the gas, I desperately hurried past the next few piles of fur and meat. As my car slipped and slid forward, the gravel shifting beneath my tires and the first drops of rain pattering along the roof, I had to slam on the brakes to avoid something as it tore out of the tree line. I skidded to a halt on the dirt side road, my foot resting firmly on the brake, and watched a great mass pull itself through the brush. In that moment, I remembered a story my grandpa told me about a car wreck he'd seen while driving cross-country. Moose, he said, were huge and defensive creatures, that they had no trouble trampling a car, and that you should never challenge them. Just wait, he used to say, and let them pass. Don't speed towards them, don't honk your horn, don't yell, and don't get out of your car. So with that echoing in my mind, I sat on the empty road and watched as the animal's hulking form pulled itself forward. Its fur was patchy and ragged. From my seat I could see darker spots where burrs and nettles clung to it and weighed the creature down. I watched its chest heave as it struggled to breathe under its own weight. Or maybe it was breathing in the smell of all that roadkill. Dark masses, the same ones that covered its body, had collected over its eyes and nose. I'm not sure if it could even see me. My focus was pulled away as a drop of water ran down my nose. Sweat? Or rain? Was rain leaking into my car? I had hoped, All day for a cool rain, and now it was here just in time. Rain would help this creature wash its fur clean, wash away the roadkill, and then I could finally go home. I could drive home in the cool evening air, and I wouldn't need to think about the moose, its eyes knit shut by nettles. I watched another bead of rain run down the windshield and let out a breath I'd been holding. But the moose didn't leave. That's when I noticed it. The temperature wasn't right. It was cool inside the car, the AC made sure of that, but it still felt so hot leaning against the windshield. Come to think of it, the wind hadn't picked up at all, but there was still this persistent tap, patter of rain all around my car. Watching the moose closely, I couldn't help but notice that while its fur was weighed down, it didn't glisten. The dryness in my throat returned as the patterns on the moose's pelt began to shift and buzz around it. Flies. Dozens of them, hundreds of them, like great black clouds of frantic heat. I watched through the condensation as their tiny bodies continued to ping against the shell of my car. They clung to the glass and flew around the doors, searching for any gap or crevice they could pull their fat, winged little bodies into. They continued to batter themselves against the metal walls that surrounded me, and I became soberingly aware of how thin those walls were. They kept battering, desperate to get out of the heat. The buzzing emanated louder and louder and louder, tearing into my mind. I could barely focus as I extended a hand and switched off the ignition. I took a shuddering breath and waited. Hands cupped over my ears to try and keep out the flies as they called for relief. I shrunk down in the driver's seat and stared across at the moose, transfixed. It was frantically swinging its head, flailing, trying to clear away the swarm that had now crowded around its mouth and its neck. With each swing, the moose's antlers scraped the gravel, and the flies redoubled their efforts. I don't know how long I watched it for. The flies abandoned my car and swarmed over their prey, biting and ripping, driven into a frenzy by the heat. Eventually the moose, its fur matted by its own blood, fled, taking its pursuers with it. I didn't leave until the sun had set, and I was sure I was safe. I called in sick the next morning. I couldn't bear to drive those 2 hours. I couldn't bear to race the sun to work, to feel it cooking my mind. I couldn't bear the thought of another mound of red gore, already picked through by a frenzy of hungry flies.